Hello class, my name is Sydney Walters and I decided to do my presentation on Ruth Bader Ginsburg, or RBG for short. So Ruth served as the United States Supreme Court Justice for 27 years. She was sworn in 1993 and served until she passed away in 2020 due to complications with pancreatic cancer. She advocated for overall equality for everyone, but much of her focus was on gender equality and women's rights. RBG was prompted to become an activist for social change after all of the sexism and discrimination that she faced throughout her career on the basis of her gender. As a woman growing up in the 1950s, it was very difficult for her to find a job, and when she was offered jobs, it was at a very low salary compared to her male counterparts who would be doing the exact same job. She even had to hide her pregnancy from her peers in fear of being terminated or just treated unfairly. It was both the discrimination that she faced and the discrimination that she witnessed that inspired her to become an activist. As a woman myself, Ruth Bader Ginsburg has always been somebody that inspired me and somebody that I looked up to. Her passing in 2020 was very devastating, and I want to make sure that more people hear her story and all of her accomplishments. So Ruth began her academic and professional life at Cornell University, where she graduated first in her class in 1954. She soon after married Martin Ginsburg, who was a fellow law student, and they soon gave birth to their first child. Early on in their marriage, Martin was drafted into the military. This left Ruth with a newborn daughter. When he came back from the war, the couple enrolled in Harvard Law School together, learning how to balance taking care of a young child and receiving an education. Their graduating class at Harvard had 500 students in it, and only 8 of those students were women. And while attending Harvard, Martin developed pretty severe testicular cancer, and Ruth, on top of her own workload, would go into some of his classes and take notes for him. And eventually he recovered, and in 1957 he got a new job at a New York law firm. So RBG transferred to Columbia Law School, where she graduated again, first in her class, in 1959. These institutions that she was a part of were not very supportive for women. Her and many of her female peers were often looked down upon for pursuing law as a career, as people believed that it took opportunities away from men. After she completed all of her schooling, she had a great difficulty finding a career or a job that would hire a woman. She was a clerk for a U.S. District Judge, Edmund Palmieri, for a while until she was able to find a different job as a law professor at Rutgers University. She worked here for 9 years, from 1963 to 1972. And then in 1972, she began teaching at Columbia, where she taught for 8 years. And she was actually the first woman to be tenured. Throughout the 1970s, RBG was the director of the Women's Rights Project of the ACLU. This stands for American Civil Liberties Union. And while she was the director, she successfully argued 6 very integral Supreme Court cases, including Duren versus Missouri, Califano versus Goldfarb, Edwards versus Healy, Weinberger versus Weisenfeld, Kahn versus Shevin, and Frontiero versus Richardson. Then in 1980, Ruth was appointed by President Jimmy Carter to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. She worked there for 13 years until finally President Bill Clinton appointed her to the U.S. Supreme Court. So as RBG kind of grew up and learned and experienced life and the discrimination and misogyny of being a woman, she was kind of able to develop her strategies of her activism. She felt that it worked the best when she focused on specific issues rather than bigger issues. She believed that major social change would come from Congress, not just from the courts. So by focusing in on specific areas of discrimination rather than larger and more complicated ones, she was able to help more change be made. And I would say that it's pretty hard to critique Ruth Bader Ginsburg. The things she accomplished during the times that she did is legendary. It's amazing. One thing that I will say is, while she did advocate for women's rights, it's hard to say whether or not she was also advocating for the rights of Black women and other people of color. I think it's safe to say that she was in support of the civil rights movement. She was in support of the civil rights movement, but I think that she could have definitely done more in the realm of racial inequality, since she did have such a huge influence over issues with gender inequality. I think she could have done a lot in regards to racial inequality. Nonetheless, I think it goes without saying that Ruth Bader Ginsburg was one of the most influential activists of all time. I hope that we continue to see powerful women like her paving the way for women in the future. Thank you.